So,
How's it
hello,
going?
sir. Thank God I'm doing well.
hmm
We were talking behind the scene, behind the curtain. Uh, we were having just a little small conversation about uh, Jewish and Christian relationships. And I wanted to stress that unfortunately today in Israel, there are many Christians in the old city that are suffering from seemingly uh, uh, different groups of Haredim over there spitting on them, or some other groups over there that are just calling them out or being very disruptive to their uh, uh, tour groups.
hmm
And there's been a decline in tourism because of that. That's what they say. Now, the discussion was in the media that the rabbis all are condemning this, right? So that's like should be the A-OK. However, on the ground inside, uh, you see that uh, people are still not. It's the message is not getting through, right? There's like by this church, there's this big letter with the rabbis written on it saying like, of course, it's horrible. Uh, what I think the solution for this is more of highlighting more of the conversation, like Rabbi Jonathan Sachs,
hmm
who in one of his books, which was censored unfortunately, mentions how God speaks to different people in different languages, and to the Muslims through Islam and Muhammad, and through Christianity through to Christians through Christianity, and he was basically asked to get rid of that because of it could be controversial. However, there's many of these different rabbis over thousands of years that had these little controversial lines. Jacob loves quoting Maimonides, which is a fantastic quote of his, who also sees Christianity and Islam as the path makers for the Messiah,
hmm
which was also censored. And I'm not blaming the censors necessarily. Sometimes that was needed due to historical reasons, cultural reasons, what's going on over there. But either way, there should be a lot more of a loving and understanding conversation, similar to the type we have in this little corner.
Yeah, I actually think they connect. I mean, your point about the rabbi and the rebel, like the rabbi and the people doing things out of their own kind of like volition, whatever is driving them, actually might connect to one of our missionaries.
Oh, definitely about that you should be drinking his water, right? We said that you need to
hmm
be drinking it properly. You know what you're drinking. You know and I mean that has a lot to do with lekabel, and we said masira, right?
hmm
Clearly there isn't a kabbalah over here. They're not fully accepting and understanding what it is that's required from them. Unfortunately, this has ripples also politically in Israel right now. While I understand the frustration of the settlers that are being, let's say, attacked by seemingly Palestinian rioters. Having said that, doing something that almost is never done, but happened, this week, where they went into Arab towns and burnt businesses and burnt cars. Now, all the political spectrum came out against it, and the rabbis came out against it, but still in our Torah and in our extended text, we do have remnants of elements like that, where we're attacking, where we're destroying, where like we're seeing the one as the other, and you could say that rabbis, today they explain that that's like uh, that's not really the interpretation anymore, and that's not how we act. The question is that a lechatchila or a diavad? Like, are we
hmm
saying, like, yeah, we used to look at the one as the other, but not anymore, or God never wanted us to look at the other that way? And I always go back to the line when the Israelites need to come back, are on their way back into coming to Israel for the first time from the desert. They want to go through Edom, and Edom
Right.
says no, and God lets them know you got to respect him, because Edom Achicha, like, this guy is part of the game that's going on. right? God he's playing Dungeons and Dragons, and the Dragon Master is letting you know that you're only, you're a main character, and it's a really big deal. But there's a tavern, and there's elves, and there's dwarves, and like you gotta be. And I'm not trying to say like Arabs or dwarves. We could be the dwarves. It's all good. I'm just saying,
we are the dwarves.
We are the dwarves, exactly. So we are the dwarves
in some respects.
So yeah, there should be more peace and love, as they say.
Cool.
All right, so let's get cracking. Do we want to share? Yeah, there we go. And do you mind just extending it a bit? Perfect. Okay, where were we? We are
we were at the 6th.
We're at 6. Wait, what's 5?
So 5 is Ben Yochanan.
Okay, right. The house is going to be open. We discussed the whole conversation with the women, and we managed to pass out without being canceled. That also has to do with, I don't know how many people were watching, so it's all good. Okay, we're on to Mishnah 6 then.
Okay.
Yoshua Ben, you mind making it just a drop bigger?
Yeah, of course. Nope, that's the wrong. How's that?
That's perfect. Yoshua ben Prachya v'natai ha'arbeli kiblu mehem. Yoshua ben Prachya omer, עשה לך רב וקנה לך חבר, והווה דן את כל האדם לקו זכות. Joshua ben Prahia and Natai the Arbeliot received the oral tradition from them. Joshua ben Prahia used to say, appoint for thyself a teacher, rabbi in our case, and acquire for thyself a companion, and judge all men with the scale weighted in his favor. Okay. All right. So let's do some context again, right? So we are in the period of the zugot, right? We said we're in the pairs, and the pairs work together. And the pairs, this has to also do, like, you can no longer give someone the wisdom or the tradition alone. It fractured and requires two people, and in some way it's sort of like a requirement. You always want to have two different opinions or two different aspects dealing with the same idea. That's why you can get to a more full truth, and that repeats itself many times in all of Pirkei Avot, where you see like there's opinions and different takes on these things. And we also have that Yoshua ben. You also sing Yoshua ben Prachya and Natan Harbeli. This is different versions of din and ahava and love, right? We're saying we say asel harav uknel chaver. Asel harav would be more of din, justice, like be part of the system and accept authority. And knel chaver is more coming from, let's say, a love sort of perspective. Okay, but again, you're getting these two different aspects. Natai Harbeli is Mount Arbel, which is in the lower Galilee by Tiberias. And I think also the last few were also from up north, and that just also has to do with historical context. This is during the Hasmonean rule, which started in Judah and then made its way up north. So seemingly you could see here the union between the authority, the Judean kings, the Hasmonean kings, and the rabbis of the north. They are, we're seeing a lot of them. It's like sort of like the Starks. They're the north. And yeah, so that just puts us as far as that context goes. It's just interesting about Yoshua ben Prachya. So he actually, here we see he's coming sort of from a love perspective, knel chaver. However, he got in trouble with this in the Gemara, which Talmud. I am embarrassing my grandfather, but I don't remember which tractate. Either way, he is running away from Alexander Yanai. Alexander Janus, he was one of the rulers at the time. He was more towards favor of the Tzdokim, and he was not so cool. He wasn't so down with the rabbis, and he was chasing the rabbis. And Yeshua ben Parchia flees to Egypt. Now in Egypt, he takes with him one of his students. His student is Jesus, and Jesus is with him, and they run together to Egypt. And then there's some story about which hotel they're looking at, and Jesus sort of has this comment about the hotel that really upsets, or motel that really upsets Rabbi Yeshua ben Parchia. And Rabbi Yeshua ben Parchia pushes him away, tells him, like, I'm going to put you like in exile. And Jesus is looking for repentance and trying to be accepted again. And then when he comes to Rabbi Yeshua ben Parchia, the Gemara, the Talmud mentions that he's in the middle of prayer, and his eyes are closed, and Jesus comes, and he gives Jesus, this is, I guess, like the first moment of the Israeli, wait a second. He tells Jesus to, like, 1 second. And Jesus gets very offended by this. He thinks
because this also means other things in other languages.
Right, other thing. No, he's feeling rejected again. He's feeling like he's told again, you can't come back. And because of that, he goes off and does his thing. And the Talmud pushes, criticizes Rabbi Yeshua ben Parchia about this, and said that, you pushed away with two hands. And some would say this is also the traumatic reaction that Jesus has to love, right? How Christianity is built on love, because his experience was he was not being loved. He wasn't being seen, and he was pushed away. Yeah. And like I was mentioning, that you have over here din and you have over here justice and ahava, because Natai Harbeli also was the Av Beit Din at the time. As part of the Zugot, he also represented Din. And in general, we say, in Hebrew, we say, Yad Yamin mekarevet, Yad Smol docha. The right hand embraces, the left hand pushes away. But the left hand is the weaker hand. So even when you push away, you don't want to push someone too far where you can't bring them back into the fold. So just a little context on Yeshua ben Parchia and the Jesus connection.
Yeah, isn't there also a story? I'm definitely not trying to make comparisons, but that's just in terms of pushing people away. Isn't there a story with, like, the origin of Amalek, or his mother, like, wanted to convert, or some kind of like a nemesis of Israel? I think it was Amalek, maybe somebody else, and she wanted to convert or something, but she was not.
You're saying right now is ringing a bell, but who is that? I don't think it's Amalek. Who wanted to be? That is, now this is going to drive me nuts. It's like not knowing the name of the song.
Is this Timna? Is that
Timna? Is it Timna? And I see Rabbi Molos with us. Rabbi, if you have any comments or introductions, you could kick it. But Timna. I'm really.
By the way, Dan says that Sota 47a is what you discussed, I think.
What I discussed is Sota A? Okay. We'll get back to that example. I'll follow up on that. But there is such a story like that. No, I'm thinking if there's a story about this guy, this baby that Moses saves. And he's a bad guy. Actually, it's not that one. All right. Anyways, we'll get back to that. Let's continue. Okay, so we spoke about Rabbi Yeshua, and let's talk about what they're actually discussing over here after we move through the context. 1 second. What does Rabbi Malot say? Timna was mother of Amalek, went to Asa because not accepted by Jah. Right. First of all, you were right. It was Amalek. I just wasn't thinking about it in that correct. Well, yeah. Okay, so this would be one of those shitas. So I guess, lesson learned. This also has to do with Chanochet Anar Lefi Darko, with Esav and Yaakov specifically, which was like, how could Yitzchak have two sons that are so different from each other.
Yeah.
And the idea was like, you have to treat each one differently. And obviously Rabbi Millet, as the educator, knows that very well. I'm sure he has to deal with each one of his students differently. Okay. So we have over here, appoint thyself a teacher, aselech harav. We're looking at the teacher as a rabbi. Also, a rabbi is really, the origin of a rabbi is the Talmid Chacham. Unlike the philosopher that creates students, the Talmid Chacham is known because he is the student. It's not because he reaches like this level of Rav. He's a Talmid Chacham. He was an amazing student of someone else. And that's like what we're focusing on. It's really more about the student and less about the rabbi, but obviously the relationship as a whole is required. Okay, so there's different interpretations. What does that mean? Aselech harav, aside from like, open up your yellow pages and find a rabbi. So one is locating like a point of orientation, right? Like there's a lot going on over there. You need to find a certain rabbi. You need to find someone you're following. Obviously, there's the concept itself that you're following of like, the highest high, which is God. But you want to create a rabbi. You want to find a point of orientation. There's the idea of a rabbi, which is find yourself a rabbi, as in don't go about living a Jewish life assuming you understand things by yourself. Rather, you need to have yourself, you need to be connected to the tradition, and the tradition is safeguarded by the rabbis.
Right.
And that's why you have to make sure it's more of a, like, not a specific rabbi, but you make sure you're connected to the rabbis.
And I think that's where that's the connection I wanted to draw, just to connect it to kind of what we discussed right at the beginning of like, you need to have that. And I was looking through some of the Hasidic kind of like commentaries on this, like how you need to connect that different, have a head and like understand your role, or not necessarily role, but your strengths and weaknesses, and having a rabbi, that Talmid Chacham, that already knows a lot, somebody who can direct you. And how, if you don't have that, if you don't listen to, in that metaphor, the head, let's say, then you might end up doing things that are not good, like we discussed at the beginning.
I agree. Even Chacham, I'm just, because Shlomo HaMelech were asked to be like, the wisest of all men. And there's a discussion there that he was even smarter than a deaf man, a fool, and a blind man, I think. And you'd be like, well, obvious. But the idea is that he learned from them as well.
Mm-hmm.
Right? He knew to draw wisdom from everywhere and really to orient oneself.
Right.
Okay. There are Aselech Harav. This also has to do with the idea still relating to the Zugot, which is later on that also doubles up when we look at Knelech HaChaver, but the idea is also be in a partnership where you're learning with someone constantly. So aside from and there's different opinions whether it needs to be a rabbi that is greater than you or at the same level. Even some say that even if it's a rabbi that at a lower level than you, but just to make sure you have a rabbi, it less matters if he's like here to teach you more about like that you have that system. And then that would be like connected with making sure that you're constantly learning together and doing things together as well. I think there is an analogy that, like, as far as Knelech Harav, also that relates to a field with many, many different trees. So like once you Knelech Harav, once you acquire a rabbi, it's almost as if you acquired a field full of trees that you no longer need to go out and searching for sustenance and food. Rather, you could find it all in your local rabbi. And
Wait,
a rabbi.
I just pause here because I had a question at this. So you said acquire. For a rabbi, it says do, like a se. For a friend, it says acquire. So were you meaning to say that, to give that analogy for a friend, as opposed to, because he said rabbi? No, I'm talking about a rabbi. The focus on acquire and connect. Well, let's move into that right now. Like, acquire yourself a friend. In Hebrew, connect would be like buy yourself a friend. Right. Yeah.
It's like purchase yourself a friend. So first off, it starts. There's like a term kids use today called touch grass. I don't know if you've heard that before. Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So Knelech HaChaver is also, we had in the first Mishnayot, we had the individual, then we had the house, and now we're really going out there to society at this point. And the idea is like eventually you also need to go out there and like talk to other people and see other people and be part of like the greater world. So there's just as far as the idea of Knei Chaver, we should realize a few chapters in that we're being slowly like sort of pulled out right now into further circles, right? Like outside from starting just with us. And chaver also means like a real friend. It doesn't mean just like a buddy, but like, just some random guy, but a real close friendship. And then with regards to like why we're using the term Kaneh, acquire, because an investment like this, a relationship like this is like an investment. It requires a lot of your time, a lot of your effort, and you should look at it as if it's a purchase that you have to take seriously. And you're going to do your due diligence, and you're going to read, and you're going to look at the reviews, and you're going to save up the money to do it. So here too, with like a friendship, it's having those phone calls, picking up when he's texting, and you're like, I can't talk right now, but you got to do that. Going out there, being his shoulder to cry, and all those things require from you and acquire from you to do these things. And that is a real investment that you need to put in. And, this is very different than the like button, right? Or like, now I have a friend on Facebook. This is like a much larger commitment, which is like, you really need to commit to this person.
Right, give of yourself, whether that's coins that used to, like, I mean, if it's a purchase, you give something off yourself. It's like a slice of yourself.
So we definitely know this with like a husband and wife, but also in a friendship, like those concessions, right, that we have, like they make the relationship stronger.
Yeah.
And the Torah using this terminology, the Mishnah using this terminology is trying to stress that point. Some also say that it's a friend that will push you to be better, right? So it's not only, yes, it has to be a real friend, and even that real friend needs to be the type of friend that is constantly pushing you to be doing like a better job.
Yeah, I think that might come up again. I think that sounds familiar in the somewhere in the Pirkei Avot that it comes up again, that you need to push your friend.
It does, and also the reverse happens as well, which we'll see also. Okay. The next parsha, exactly. Okay, good. Okay, so then we have the Havei Dan et kol adam lekav zchut, right? And judge all men with a scale weighted in his favor. So, first off, some look at all men over here in reference to the people we just spoke about previously, the rabbi and the friend. And you'd be like, well, what do you mean? It's the rabbi I selected for myself, and it's the best friend that we just said I made myself. Like, obviously, I'm going to look at them in favor. But many times that could be paradoxical, because we tend to put definitely in new relationships. I just made this rabbi and I just found this friend. I tend to put them on a pedestal, right? Like these guys are amazing. And then when they mess up, there's a part of me that's like very disappointed and upset about that. And the idea is like, no, like you should work even harder to make sure that you're looking at them favorably. Now, there's other interpretations of, why does it not just say v'havei dan et ha'adam lekav zchut, right? And judge man with the scale weighted in his favor. Why all men? So there's interpretations that it means all men means also Gentiles. And some say that it means all men even means yourself, right? Because you're going to be very self-critical about yourself. But even you, when you're looking at yourself, you have to see the good in you and realize that and some people say, that's the Amalek that's telling you that you can't do it. And you have to push back on that, like the internal Amalek, and say like, no, I can't do it. What I prefer the interpretation of all men, or kol ha'adam, which means all of you. So there's definitely going to be bad things you see. There's going to be bad things you definitely know about. However, if that's all you're looking at, if you're only looking at those bad things, then I could go to a list and be like, here are like the things that bother me about Ben. But am I going to look at the totality of Ben and all the good things he does? And then when I weigh those scales, most probably it's going to be for good. And it's important when we're looking at the other to take him in his totality and realize that we're judging him not by this one thing and not by this one action, by who he is fully. And this would be sort of like the pixel analogy, right? So if I'm zooming in on a pixel, it's just a blurry thing. If I zoom out and I see all those pixels together, I have my beautiful painting.
Wait, but does that mean that what if you zoom out and you do see some bad things, and even quantitatively there is more bad than good? Does that still mean that you shouldn't tilt the scale, like look at the good and the bad? Or
so that is a fantastic question, and we're going to hit it in the next Mishnah.
Okay, should we move naturally into the next one?
Yeah, I mean, there's a exactly. There's a beautiful transition. Okay, so we have our boy. 1 second, we have a comment over here. Dan, Deuteronomy, you shall not brew justice, you shall not show for it, and you shall not take a bribe. For robbery blinds the eyes of the wise and perverts Yaslif Divrei Tzadikim, just words. Okay, so we also touch these things soon enough, Dan. Okay, so we have Natai Harbeli. So it's the same guy from the Mount Arbel or that area, and he's back. And he's telling us, he's giving us his thoughts right now. Harchek meshachen ra ve'al titchaber larasha ve'al titchaesh min ha-puranut. Natai the Arbelite used to say, keep a distance from an evil neighbor. Do not become attached to the wicked, and do not abandon faith in divine retribution. Okay, so a nice, short and sweet. So, and this will connect to what you were saying, but what if there is this evil person, right? So the bad neighbor is the neighbor. What is the bad? It's not someone that just like doesn't pay his taxes or has, let's say, a Trump/Biden 2024 thing on his thing, right? So that's not the bad neighbor. The bad neighbor is the neighbor that keeps on causing trouble. Everyone knows the bad neighbor. He just keeps on causing trouble in the neighborhood, and the requirement is that you either move away from him or keep away from him or stay away from him, because in the end you are where you live, and these will definitely affect you. If you're hanging out around these people all the time, you might even end up thinking that their behavior is normal, right? So it's quickly telling you to keep away from these people. There are some interpretations that say, even though I would say this is a stretch, harchek mishachen ra, which is, if you read it in Hebrew, you could say harchek mishachen ra. So keep evil away from your neighbor. So if you see evil making its way to your neighbor, protect your neighbor from that. But again, I think that's more of like it's more of a play on words, and I don't know if I see that interpretation here.
Could you also read it harchek mishachen ra, meaning like the one who is away from a neighbor is evil, is bad? Or is that
hamitrachek mishachen ra? Yeah, sure. Exactly. It's your fault in the end, right? We started with someone else, and now it's you.
I wanted to it's interesting because I just to draw the connection between last week, at least here outside of Israel, last week's parasha about Korach, and how the Reubenites were the neighbors of this group of Levites. Correct me if I'm wrong, but the Reubenites were the neighbors. And that is one example of how the neighbors of this evil congregation that Korach led were duped into this rebellion because they were neighbors. The camps were close together.
So that would be a perfect example of how, obviously every parent tells this to this kid, they're like, don't hang out with Jesse. He's a bad influence, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Hemshachnu?
Yeah.
And we said, okay, harchek mishachen ra, ve'al titchaber larasha. Do not become attached to the wicked. Now, just the difference between keep a distance from the evil neighbor, do not become attached to the wicked. Keeping your distance from the neighbor is being framed as not the person that I'm buddy with. He's the neighbor. Don't be attached to the wicked, because that's sort of connected to the knelech hachaver. Because you can get attached to someone. You could get very close buddies with someone. So here it's talking about being one is being wary of like, the Jansons down there are crazy. They keep on poisoning the dogs. They keep on going nuts. Like they're just the bad neighbor, move away. Then there's the person that is the bad influence specifically, but not because like he's Hitler, just because like he could be like someone that you do feel close with, but might be someone that's problematic. And like, again, like it almost seems obvious. You'd be like, of course, stay away from evil. Great. Why is that like something I need to be told? The Gemara talks about Tov Kiddush Hashem al Chilul Hashem. And again, that seems like obvious, but there are interpretations that say that because in theory, you could say that the real high level is doing a Kiddush Hashem from a Chilul Hashem, right? Like finding something evil and from there, raising up the sparks, taking out the nitzotzot, bringing out the best. So
right, that's okay. I was just reading about that, I think, with Rambam and thinking about like the Yetzer Kovesh et Yitzro.
Ezu Gibor Kovesh et Yitzro. And you see that in theory, you might be inclined to be like, listen, I see that my neighbor over there is like problematic, but like I want to be able to help him. I see the good in him, right? So while that is something that one can do, you have to be tread very carefully. And they're saying, and like initially they're saying, don't even do it. Al titchaber l'rasha. Now you're into kiruv, you're into doing this, you're into doing that. Okay, we could talk about it, but like also then it has to be very measured when going about like an act like this. Okay, the al tichaesh mean ha puranut, right? Do not abandon faith in the divine retribution. So this also gets broken down. First of all, some people relate it back to the friend, as in don't despair. And this is why you need the friend. You need the friend to be able during these times to go to the friend and talk to him and have him be there for you. And that's why like that, you'll be able to avoid this despair. How would you do that? By connecting to the friend. Now, some people say, don't be despaired that bad things are happening to you, even seemingly you didn't do anything bad. Don't be despaired that bad things aren't happening to other people that are doing bad things. And then you'll be like, there's no justice in the world. So also like, don't be focusing on that as well. And also don't assume that the bad things won't happen to you, right? One of them, you were righteous and you're being screwed. The other one, you were righteous and you're seeing the bad guy be rewarded. The third version is you yourself are the person that's doing something bad. And you see, guess what? The cops didn't come and the tax authorities didn't come and nothing bad's happening to me. So I'm scot-free. You should also not assume that it's going to work out well, because eventually the tax man comes knocking. Right. So again, it's supposed to giving you sort of a frame of this is things that you can't expect, even if seemingly you got away from this. In the next chapter, we're going to be touching on, I think what you were alluding to about what do you do if you see someone that's actually wicked.
Yeah. I'm curious if you know, Dan, I don't know exactly what you're saying, but I'm curious. I don't know if Chezi
for Dan, it sounds like a real challenge to follow both Nita and JBP. Nita, I guess he's saying Nitaya Harbeli. I think some people say his name was Mati, maybe Matthew even. But what is he saying about Harchek Mashachen Rav? Yeah. So Dan, which JBP thing specifically are you talking about that is contradicting Nitaya Harbeli? Please share, and we'd love to discuss. One second. Where is the link? How do I put the link on this though? If people want to join, that is. 1 second.
To judge all favorably Joshua ben Prachya.
Got it. Okay. To judge all favorably Joshua ben Prachya. Oh, Joshua ben Prachya. I thought Jordan B. Peterson. Okay, that's funny. Just because it's this little corner. Okay, I stand corrected. Okay, so yeah, we're going Havei down the kol down the kaf zchut, and it's saying keeping away. So this tension is in the next Mishnah, I believe. Let's roll down.
I mean, and that's the idea of the pairs. I mean, how do you follow both Shammai and Hillel? Or I mean, I guess it's a synthesis, but also I guess there is sometimes it does tilt to one specifically. Where are we? Here we
go. Okay. We are in Yehuda ben Tabai v'Shimon ben Shatach. Kiblu mehem. Who? From the previous group. Yehuda ben Tabai omer, al ta'ash atzmecha k'orchei hadinin. וכשהיו בעלי דינין עומדים לפניך, יהיו בעיניך כרשעים. וכשנפטרים לפניך, יהיו בעיניך כזכאים. כשקיבלו עליהן את הדין. Shatach received, well, Shimon ben Shatach received the oral tradition from them. Judah ben Tabai said, do not, as a judge, play the part of an advocate. And when, can you expand that for a second? And exactly. Okay. And when the litigants you're jumping, are standing before you, look upon them as if they were both guilty. And when they leave your presence, look upon them as if they were both innocent when they have accepted the judgment. Okay, so what is going on over here with the terminology they're using as well? And let's break this down. So first of all, they're telling us over here, this is like I don't know if this is the first bashing of lawyers, but you're seeing already here a bashing of lawyers, right? Don't be like here there in Hebrew it's ke'orchei din, and here they're saying is don't be like as a judge, don't be like the advocate. So again, pulling us back to historical points at that time in the Roman Empire, at least, there's a lot of games being played with justice and courts, and a lot of injustice happening. And the Torah is trying to stress the fact that you definitely should not be playing any of these legal games. You should be coming about this from a different. The Torah wants you to be playing very, very fair, and it doesn't want you. Some of the interpretation says it doesn't want. Well, one is be playing very fair, as in don't be like the other lawyers out there. Two is don't be like a legal counsel that gives people false hope. Okay, that goes to people and tells them that, listen, your case is looking pretty good, and then this person's like super excited about this, and then he ends up being like completely destroyed in the day of judgment. So you have to be very, very wary when you're going around telling these people. So one, it's either don't, like again we were saying, don't be playing these games with regards to justice, and the other is be very wary with giving people legal advice and not creating some sort of false hope, or on the other side, like causing despair, telling them they have no chance. So you have to be very wary about them as well. Specifically, I just mentioned specifically when they're coming to you as a judge, right? Like they could go to you as legal counsel, as someone that gives legal counsel to see what to do. But if you're the judge, you have to be very wary to going to someone and saying, this doesn't look good. This is very apropos because in Israel right now, in one of the famous cases against Bibi Netanyahu, the prime minister, many of these so-called crazy cases are falling apart, which is not making the legal system here look good. But you were seeing over there as well that the judges were talking in closed doors, so to speak, and told them that, this is not looking good. It doesn't look like there's any bribery over here. Mm-hmm. And you would say that's very bad because now that, no verdict was given yet, but that is already creating like a whole ripple effect because you gave your opinion when it was premature. So you have to be very, very careful from that. Then there's a crazy line over here, right? Which is, V'kshiyu ba'alei dinin omdim lefanecha, yu beinecha kereshaim. But when they're standing before you, you should see them as if they were guilty, right? So this is like the opposite of innocent until proven guilty. Or like we were just hearing right now from Havei Kol down the Kaf Zchut, right? Seeing how is this not happening in the system right now, right? Like we're just talking about how I need to see the best in people, and now we're saying in the system right now I need to be seeing the worst in people. Mm-hmm. So first, we have to split them between one is happening within a legal context system and one is happening on the day to day as you're walking around the world. Okay, so in that case, and we'll just expand on that for a second. There are different interpretations. Some people say, okay, if it's a regular dude, if it's a regular guy, then you need to assume that he is, if something happened that you're not sure if it's good or bad, what his intentions were, assume the better. If it's a righteous person, even though he did something that seemingly looks really bad, you must try to find the good in it.
Right.
Then the question, what do you do about the evil person? Maimonides comes and says to the evil person, even if he's doing something that seems good, assume that it's evil. However, we have in the more Hasidic world, we have something that I mentioned here in the past. Da sheyesh ladun kol adam lekav zchut. Like we said, you have to judge everyone in favor. Ve'afilu shu rasha gamur, even someone that is purely wicked, tzarich lechapes ve'limtzo bo eze me'at tov. We have to search and try to find some kernel of good in him. Ki be'oto me'at eino rasha. In that kernel, he's not evil. Ve'al yedei ze and because of that, if you find that, you let him recognize that within himself, and you could raise him up. You can bring him back. Okay, so generally speaking, this goes back to the bad, wicked neighbor.
Yeah,
there is something about looking at even the wicked and trying to find the truth, the grain of truth of them. However, when Kanye West is saying that, like, I would like meet with Hitler, right? Like, it just doesn't sound good to anyone. And I understand that he's trying to find that little kernel of truth of like, even he's like a good guy. However, and kudos to him. And I think like people bashed him for the wrong reasons. I'm saying that as a Jew, but either way, there is something very, very powerful about that even the evil person needs to be seen that way. However, let's jump back from the out in the jungle attitude to into the legal system. And into the legal system when they're saying you have to see everyone as the guilty because we want to safeguard you. Your buddy comes in, or you look at this like poor lady and she seems so sad, and you're going to assume the best, or you're going to think like, listen, this guy is there's no way Father Time over here robbed that bank. You know what I mean? He looks too old. I can't believe it. So the Mishnah is saying, no, assume people are problematic. People have evil inclinations. People could be very, very deceptive. So we want you to have your fighting goggles on because you need to assume for this case, you need to be armed with the vision of assuming the worst in people. So it's not always assume the worst in people, but you can't be looking at the world with rose glasses on.
So how does that wait? So this part you just said, assume the worst from a legal perspective, let's say. So account for the worst, maybe. And
don't assume they were guilty. Believe that they could be guilty.
Right. So account for the possibility.
Yes.
But then at the beginning you said that I don't know if you said the Talmud, but we want to think that we can, if it's the good, then we would expect certain possibilities, maybe more probable, or just certain possibilities. If the person is evil, then we will expect other possibilities. And I think I could see that, like from my little knowledge of the Talmud, seeing that in Bava Metzia, for example. Don't remember the exact example, but how it kind of accounts for if it's somebody that already showed some good favor, then he might not need to give an oath or something like that. But if it's somebody that didn't show any kind of favor, we don't know if he's good or bad, then we even more so, let's say, assume the worst. So how does those clash?
So again, I would say the split is happening, one in the legal system and one out in the jungle. In the legal system, you require 2 witnesses. In the legal system, you require that they both warned him, right? So there's a whole different set of rules that are applying at that point. And we're telling the judge, you can't look at Phil because yes and no. Like we look at for example, a shor mu'ad, right? A ox that rammed 3 times already. We know it's bad news.
Yeah.
Right. So there is that opinion. However, again, the conversation about looking at assuming the best in someone is really happening not within the courtroom. That's happening. You as an individual need to be looking at that. And then that whole discussion of, if it's an evil person, should you assume evil? If it's a righteous person, you should assume righteous. That's really happening again with regards to the outside, not necessarily in the courtroom. Okay, 1 second. Let me get reoriented over here. Okay, now, so that we said we have to assume that the other person not is guilty, but can be guilty.
Mm-hmm.
It can be guilty.
Yeah.
However, uksheniftarim, right? And when they leave your presence, look upon them as if they were both innocent. When they have accepted the judgment. Okay, so now, the second it's over, right? At some point, you need to decide. You need to move and say, like, okay, the left hand needs to come down, right? We have right, we have love, but the right hand needs to come down eventually and make a decision. It has to do din, has to do justice, has to decide right or left. Which way are we going? The second that's over, all right, I take off those glasses that could see the evil potential in someone, and then I realize, listen, ultimately, I don't know the full truth, right? Elu divrei Elohim chaim. I need to believe that both people that were talking to me were doing their best to speak the truth, their truth. I know that sounds like a buzzword, like we all have our truth, but the attitude is to really be able to be sympathetic of that. And the second the judgment has been made,
mm-hmm.
right? Like, now look at them as innocent. Even more so when shekiblu ehem tadin, because once I accept the judgment, it's a clean slate. I repaid back Phil. I gave him back his land. I gave him back his money. And now I am innocent again. And they want the switch to be quick. They want you to say, like, you were in the courtroom and there was a problem and I was looking at you and I was assuming it doesn't matter that you look like a little old lady that makes cookies. You could easily have done this problem or stole this money.
Mm-hmm.
But now the debt has been paid. And now the judgment has been made. The verdict was given. So now you are that old lady again. And I know you really weren't trying to screw him over. And if you did take it in, I know that you were explaining that the rent was late. And like, my life has been hard ever since my friend Cynthia passed away. I get all that, Mrs. Cohen. Like, we see that. That's amazing. But again, that has to happen in the proper order.
Right. So it's kind of like even like a cosmos. Like I'm getting like a vision of like the court itself is the midat ad-din, is the justice, right? And that is where you assume the worst, or account for the possibility of the worst. But then once you're out of that perspective, those are the goggles that you take out, and then the world is something that is more towards the mercy. I think I saw this comment that Andrew gave, and I think the rose-colored glasses, and maybe it's like the glasses are the justice, at least in the court, but then the world itself is a rose-colored world. So I think that's kind of like how I would respond to that.
Correct. So that's a nice comment, Andrew. So with regards to, let's say, the rose-colored glasses in the rose world, so we get into specifics. We're like, okay, but I'm looking at Jack the Ripper right now, right? Should I be looking like with rose glasses? And then the attitude would be like, no. Even if you see Jack the Ripper doing something seemingly good, so Maimonides will say, like, it's dangerous for you to have those looking at the world in those rose glasses at that point. You have to realize that I know it looks good, but it's most probably be bad, because you need to, at the end, use your senses and be aware that, like, the guy's very problematic. On the flip side, you have what we said, that in every evil person, you need to find the good. However, that relates to attaching yourself to the wicked and to that neighbor. Like, is this evil person in your midst when you're in this safe space, or are you in his lair where it's very difficult for you to get out? And then, like, it's going to be very difficult to try to pull that off. We should mention that the rabbi over here, Ben Tabai, Judah Ben Tabai, he himself, again, it's one of the zugot with Shimon ben Shatach, and Shimon ben Shatach, Judah ben Tabai was once in his courtroom, an innocent man was sentenced to death, and ever since that point, he would never give verdicts without counseling first Shimon ben Shatach, knowing he has his approval. So this is also in the context of like why it's so important to be judging people properly and looking in the right way to not get to that place where you unfortunately kill an innocent person. It is known that in the Talmud they say that a lethal Beit Sanhedrin, a high court, would sentence someone to death once every 70 years. And they would have even if you admitted to everything and you said the witnesses were there and you said that you totally knew what you were doing, then they'll come and say, well, then you must be crazy. And you still don't have to, we still won't sentence you to death. So the specifically about the death penalty, the Torah and the rabbis really try to avoid going down that route. And even when it has to do with the lashes, the 40 minus 1, the 39 lashes, if someone would, let's say, soil himself during the lashes, they would just stop, because the attitude is not to embarrass you. The idea is to teach you, there's like a lesson being learned over here, but it's not to shame you. It's not to embarrass you. It's for you to allow yourself to repent.
Yeah.
I'm seeing another line over here now. What is this? So no criminal record is allowed for discriminating against a person who has previously stood in court, faced and accepted consequences for his actions. Yeah, I mean, in theory, correct. Once you're done, there's no criminal record. We need to be looking at you as a clean slate. Now, you could argue, again, like in the legal system, if we know that this guy was arrested 7 times, it's going to be silly for me. And the judge, when he has his judge hat on, or his wig, knows that he needs to be assuming that everyone could be doing this, right? He's looking at him in the guilty glasses. And he also knows that this guy's done this many, many times. So obviously that will carry some weight, which one has to take into consideration when he's doing that. Any other questions on this?
Is there any? I know we covered this in the past, but it says, I think, Kiblumim. I guess it says received again here too, from the second.
So here again, because they're the pair, the zugot could receive.
Mm-hmm.
They don't moser, as in they're not their rabbis didn't hand down, rather they gave, right? And well, it's more about they received, less about what their rabbis did. They fully received.
Mm-hmm.
So that means nothing was lost in translation, so to speak. But the only way nothing is lost is being held by 2 people, by the zugot, which represent 2 different versions, right? We said, let's say, justice and love, or different aspects of the truth, which we ultimately see in the court system itself, right? We see when I'm a judge, I have this glasses on. When the verdict is done, I have that glasses on, because ultimately I realize, even when I made the judgment, that was true. That was truth in a procedural sense, but not in the ultimate sense. And that's why the second that's done, I could look at you as if you were innocent again. Because I'm assuming that now as well.
Okay.
Want to move on to the next
Mishnah?
Yeah, I think we have time for one more Mishnah. So these are short ones, which are also continuing with Shimon ben Shatach. So this is the other pair of the Zug, which we're continuing with, like these legal teachings. So Shimon ben Shatach אומר, הווה מרבה לחקור את העדים, והווה זהיר בדבריך, שמא מתוכם ילמדו שקר. Shimon ben Shatach used to say, Can you make that a little louder? Just coming out a little.
Mm-hmm.
Be thorough in interrogation of witnesses and be careful with your words, lest from them they learn to, I guess it says lie. Yes, it says lie over there as well. So, have merabel achkor ta'edim. This, again, at the time was novel. Today, less so, but it's asking you to do a thorough interrogation. And it's more than just like obviously the regular interrogations that you're going to have. Rather, it's you need to put the time and effort of really asking, cross-examining, asking all the questions. And this is again to avoid a mistake.
Mm-hmm.
And people are being very, very sensitive about that because you have to really make sure you're talking to each witness, make sure their stories corroborate. Like you really, really, really want to be very, very exact about this. And again, this is sort of self-explanatory. So this also relates back to earlier we said when you're drinking from the rabbi's words, we were saying you need to be careful that you're not drinking the wrong things. And here it's the onus is on quote unquote the rabbi or the person in this case talking. Be careful with the words you use, right? Because someone misquote you or learn a lie from that. And this has to do also with last Mishnah, which mentioned don't, be like a lawyer, which also means don't speak so much legalese. Don't be using so much jargon and so much high-level conversation, thinky-talky conversation the whole time.
Yeah.
That things get lost in translation. And worse, things get misconstrued or manipulated. And that happens often. And you could see in a court system where they take one word and yes, that's the system we have today when you say it said this, but it didn't say that. So it must not be including this. You're risking playing like real games at that point. Now we could say in modern society, well, that's the system we have. So XYZ, the Torah is trying to push you into really, really making sure you're speaking properly and being extremely, extremely careful with the wording you're using.
Yeah. So I'm curious also is there any opinion? So when I read that, it also sounded to me something like don't ask leading questions. So for example, so part of what I do as a job is I look for feedback from people, asking them about products that they use. And I try not to ask leading questions because then they will from the question that I ask, from the structure, from the language of the question that I ask, they might understand what I'm trying to get at, and they'll give me an answer that they just think is good based on what I'm giving, based on what I'm asking them. So really try not to ask leading questions. And I think also from a scientific perspective, when you do research, you do not want to convey what you're trying to get at from your question necessarily.
Right. So both relate in Dvarim, Deuteronomy. It has v'darashta v'chakarta v'sha'alta hitev. V'darashta, so you investigate it. V'darashta would be the exact termination of this. Well, you examined, you did your due diligence, and you did so very well. And this would be sort of what you're mentioning as well. So you need to. Well, I'm going to go back for a second and go to Marbel Achkor Ta'edim. There are interpretations that you want to be hitting the witnesses, even though the witnesses are not, they're not who we're after, so to speak, right? Mm-hmm. They're not the defendant. Having said that, you could still look at them like we just said in the last Mishnah. You could still look at them as if they were guilty. You could still have those goggles on saying like, even they could be lying right now. Even the witnesses could be lying. And that's why you want to be hitting them with, aside from discussing the details of the case, and you can see this today, like any good investigator, you're just going to also start asking random questions, right? You want to throw them off of, let's say, their set script.
Yeah.
And you want to shoot at them rapid fire questions to get them like sort of disoriented, to really make sure like there's nothing that's sort of orchestrated over here. And that relates to what you were mentioning, because you're asking all these questions and because you're just sort of asking even arbitrary things, you might be misconstrued. they might end up hearing something that you said because you were shooting rapid fire, because you were talking about the weather. So much information is being sputtered in the room. Then you might end up fumbling or saying something that you didn't mean to say as part of this investigation and ending up shooting yourself in the foot. So you need to be very careful about this.
Cool.
By the way, I see that Yosef made it. See, Yosef, thank you for making it at the end. And Luke, is this streaming on random?